I would like to just take a second, and if we could all just close our eyes and channel all of our energy into the Indigenous communities from the past, from the present, and those who await us in the future. I would love for all of us to share our collective gratitude for their ongoing presence as the OGs of this land that my feet stand rooted in right now. Thank you so much for your 11,000 plus years of stewardship. And I also want to acknowledge that the policies of genocide, assimilation, and relocation impact so many Native American families today. And I feel extremely passionate that we have to have ongoing efforts to acknowledge Indigenous creativity, their history, and resilience as a people. Thank you so much. I will just say again that I'm excited to be here, and I'm a little bit nervous, but we get to talk about divergence today and how it relates to the industry I'm in, which is the outdoor industry, and how it relates to me as an individual. So, I'm going too fast. now I'm off my game. Okay. Okay. So I'm a clothing designer in the outdoor industry. But what does that mean? It means I've designed everything from hunting and fishing apparel to the stuff you just throw on to go on a day hike. I've designed the gear that people use to climb Mount Denali and summit Everest. And I also have had the great privilege of designing like the snowsuits that people put their little humans in to go outside and play in the snow. And I am beyond humbled that I've had the opportunity to do this work for over a decade. Every single day, I have the opportunity to sing over the bones of my ancestors, and I get to say, who am I gonna find inspiration from today? And who do I get to learn from? Who do I get to feel compassion for? And who do I get the chance to understand better and understand what they need? It's because when you design, that's what you do. It's leading with compassion and curiosity and spending hours upon hours thinking strategically, defining problems, and working towards solving them. I don't know what's happening. Just a second. I lost my slides again. Okay. I also own a culturally inspired outdoor organization called Black Earth United, which I started last year with the help of so many people. There's too many to name that made this dream come true. But one person that sat with me night after night and day after day was my friend and business partner, Barbie Miner. Black Earth United is a multi-medium creative platform. We share stories and a different perspective of the outdoors, whether that be through fashion, through the designing of tools, through orating, video, mentoring. I want to write a book someday, and even conferences like the Throughline that we held last August. I wanted to start this company because I had felt so incredibly alone for so long in the industry that I'm in. I felt alone because I've gone years without seeing another Black person at work. I felt alone because I have only met 2 other Black female outdoor designers. And I felt alone because all of the photos and all of the imagery that we were being used, all of that inspiration was of white people. And all of the athletes I had worked with, all the customers that we did focus groups with were also white men and women. I felt alone because the outdoors and our relationship to it is so incredibly personal. And yet I left and I just felt unseen and being inside of it. And then the collective pain of 2020 came, and I felt I had to respond in a creative manner. There's been this long narrative about the outdoors that we've been sold. It's this romantic vision of the American wilderness. It's a John Hemingway short story laced with quotes from John Muir. It's an adventure drama of getting away from it all, just turning off your phone with hashtags like Wanderlust, Van Life, and Live Your Adventure. But like so many things in this country and so many things around the world right now, the outdoor industry is finally learning how to see. It is being forced to diverge from these homogenous narratives. And people are demanding that new stories are being told and the new narrative is also being formed. So that word, divergence, is the perfect adjective for what we need in the outdoor industry today. We have to diverge and we have to evolve. So when thinking about this word and this talk, of course, you start by looking up the word divergent. So when I look in the Webster's dictionary, it's where something is moving away from what's expected. But then when I dug a little deeper and thought about it from the outdoor perspective, from nature, it can mean something totally different. In nature, divergence can occur when two tectonic plates move away from each other and magma or molten rock rises to the Earth's mantle to its surface, solidifying and creating something totally new, like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge and the Pacific Ring of Fire. Like, that's incredible. And that's what Black Earth United is to me. It's the two parts of myself that have come together to form something new for an industry I love and for a people that I find so much inspiration in. I grew up spending half of my life in the Midwest and the other half up and down the West Coast. I loved the outdoors as a kid. I loved riding my bike up and down the block and making firefly necklaces, which when I think about it now is like one of the cruelest things. But I loved climbing trees too, and I still do. I love the sounds and the smells. I love just laying on my back and watching the birds. I would run like the wind into a pile of leaves and laugh so hard I could cry. I love sledding in the winter and sneaking sodas from my neighbor's fridge while I was sleeping outside under the stars. I loved all of that, and I did feel incredibly free there. But things can change as we get older, and as our eyes open wider and wider, and as we see what the world has to offer. Did you know that it's only been a little over 55 years since the passing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which amongst other things granted permission for Black communities to enter public spaces like national parks, like places that we had been banned prior. And did you know that even though new laws were introduced to rid this country of legal segregation, there is still a perceived threat of violence, of generational trauma that keeps people of color from visiting the natural world? Not to mention the monstrous amount of lynchings that occurred between 1865 and 1950 traditionally took place outdoors in natural spaces. We have to learn how to see. We have to design from a compassionate place that solves problems for the many and not the few. And we have to dig and dig for these stories to understand because they've been buried for so long. So when I'm handed a design brief for a coverall, I see Jim Crow traveling kits. Jim Crow traveling kits were used by African Americans who had to travel south of the Mason-Dixon line. There's a man by the name of Joseph K. Bowler, who was a minister. He was talking to the Chicago Defender in 1922 about why he created this kit. He was a Massachusetts resident who would travel south of the Mason-Dixon to preach the word of God. So in his kit, it included a pair of soiled coveralls, some canned salmon and other canned goods, a miniature gasoline stove, and a little scrub board. And a tabletop that was the size of a scrub board. And he had those coveralls that he would wear over his nice clothes because he couldn't so much as sit down on a train without someone spitting on him or sitting in tobacco. He carried what we think of as camping gear because he wasn't allowed to stay in hotels along his journey. A really great book to learn more about the history of retail as it relates to all the BIPOC communities is called Race and Retail, which is Consumption Across the Color Line. It's an incredible book, and I highly, highly recommend it. We have to learn how to see. We have to design from a compassionate place that solves problems for the many and not just the few. We have to dig and dig for these stories to understand because they've been buried for so long. 2 years ago, I had the ultimate pleasure of designing performance hunting and fishing apparel. I'm not either of those things. I don't participate in those activities regularly. And I stand with all you out there who do because they take an incredible amount of skill and they're incredibly difficult. So I traveled to Florida to learn how to tarpon fish. And I called my friend Elsie and her husband Jeff, and I asked, will you take me out and teach me how to hunt? And we sat in a duck blind in the freezing cold for hours and hours just so I could better understand how to design this product for people. And as I would sit there and as I was designing, I would think about how this simple act of hunting and fishing allowed my ancestors to create more power and more control over their own work. It allowed them to provide nourishment to their families that was so needed, and time away from their captors to sing and bond with one another. Another book I learned this from is called Hunting and Fishing in the New South, and I highly recommend that as well. We have to learn how to see. We have to design from a compassionate place that solves problems for the many and not just the few. We have to dig and dig for these stories because they've been buried for so long. Over the last year, I've had the greatest joy to design hiking apparel, and I loved it. I loved it because right now there is an incredible movement with Black women leading it, showing the world what it means to put your health first, to just embrace the outdoors. It's women like Morgan Dixon and Vanessa Garyon of Girl Trek, Demi Njai, founder of Black People Who Hike, and Black Girls Hike, aka Vibe Tribe Adventure CEO Jessica Newton. All of these women inspire me every day to keep it pushing and to tell our stories through apparel. So when I design hiking gear, I would envision them. And I would envision the 40 miles along the Blue Ridge Mountains that the Underground Railroad ran through, and the woman who led that journey for so many. And that's my inspiration. That's what I see as a designer. We have to learn how to see. We have to design from a compassionate place that solves problems for the many and not just the few. And we have to dig and dig for these stories because they've been buried for so long. And with Black Earth United, I can diverge from that traditional narrative. I'm not beholden to one story, and I can tell so many different ones in so many different ways because that's the outdoors. It is infinite, and it is beautiful, and it is so many different shades. So I'd like to leave you with a little story. It's from a book called Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkoe Estes. It's one of my absolute favorites. I have at least 3 in my possession at all times. A hardbound book because they're unbelievably breathtaking, and then 2 paperback, one that I write in constantly and another one to gift because someone is always in need of this book. So this story is about a singer who collects the bones of a wolf. So this singer, she was collecting and collecting for years and years, and she had found all of the parts of the skeleton, all of the parts except this last one, this very last small bone that went right into the paw of the wolf. And only after she found that bone could she sing over it. So then she placed it with all of the rest of the bones when she found it in the exact order that it would be inside a wolf's body. And she sang. And she sang over the bones from her gut. She sang over those bones that she had laid out. And the bones became flushed with the body of a beautiful wolf. And as she sang some more, and the wolf jumped to its feet and ran out into the early morning desert light and changed into a beautiful woman who emerged. She was laughing and smiling and dancing, and her beautiful hair bounced up and down with black and gray and so many beautiful shades of brown. And she ran through the forest into the sunlight and into freedom. I'm telling you all this story because in order to create and in order to design for changes in the narrative, in order to diverge from all of these narratives that we've been told, these one-way stories, we have to gather all the bones first. And that means we have to reach back into the past to create the future of the outdoors that we all deserve to see. Thank you.